Hello there, you fine specimen of a human. I hope this episode finds you well. So it's August. It happens every year, but it still takes me by surprise. I just think July felt like it was going on for, it just went so quickly. Summer's half over, more than half over, which is a bit terrifying. And in a cold country like this, it's even more terrifying. But wherever you're listening from, welcome. Make yourself at home, put your feet up, grab a cup of tea. Today we're going to be talking about training with arthritis. So this is a topic that I deal with quite regularly. I have quite a lot of older clients. I've had quite a lot of older clients over the years. Now, as most of us know, arthritis tends to hit you harder and more prominently whenever you get older and as you get older, or does it? We're going to talk about all that sort of stuff a little bit later on, but I thought it's about time we address this topic because it is quite a big one. It's a nuisance. It's annoying. There's a lot of hearsay around it. A lot of people think they kind of know what it is, and people think they know what it's like to deal with. But having managed and trained lots of clients over the years with it, I've picked up a few things from training them: what works, what doesn't work, what helps, what doesn't help. So just thought I'd share some of that, plus look into what some of the relevant authorities and relevant agencies say about it and how to deal with it, how to possibly prevent it, how to treat it, what to do when it comes to training, what works, what doesn't work, and all that stuff. Thank you so much for listening, for taking the time to listen. If this is your first time listening, you're very welcome. Should say that we are a gym based in Warrenpoint and Dromore in County Down, Northern Ireland, and we do have a couple of spaces free in our classes at the moment. Just a quick plug, but we've had some really some new members join recently, some new class members, and it's been great. Some old faces back as well, so it's been absolutely fantastic just to see them, and the new faces as well. So if you would like to come and check out some of our classes, we have one on every evening from 6:15 p.m. to 7:15 p.m. On Monday and Thursday, we've got a class. It's our flagship class called Total Body Toning. It's a mix of everything. We've got resistance, we've got bodyweight exercises, kettlebells, dumbbells, sometimes barbells. So lots of resistance exercise, but also cardio. So machines, running, skipping, all sorts of things. And also some core work. So it's a bit of a mixture of everything. On Tuesdays and Friday evenings, we have Power, which is our strength class. So it's all about getting stronger. So that comes down to getting your body weight strength stronger, and also externally trying to lift heavier on barbells and things. So just starting where you're at. You might only lift the barbell your first week. Some of the guys, we started this off in October, and some of the guys have gotten really strong. Guys and girls, I say guys kind of collectively, but guys and girls have gotten really strong, added some proper strength in those months, and the more consistently you stick at it, obviously the more you're going to be rewarded. And then on Wednesday evening and on Saturday morning at 8:15 till 9 a.m. we have Atomic, which is our HIIT cardio class. So if you want to work up a sweat, you want to get out of breath, you want not have to think too hard, come to that class. That's the one for you. You're going to burn a lot of calories, you're going to get those endorphins going, you're going to be working your aerobic system, and you're going to feel absolutely great after it. Maybe not during it, but after it. But you can go as hard as you want to. So I'll try and put a link in the show notes about that class. If you go to the classes and you're listening, do share the classes with other people, because we'd love to get those completely filled up. We've still got a couple of spaces, not too many, but once everybody comes back, people are on holidays and stuff at the minute, but we'd love to get those classes maxed out and to get to the point where we have to think about trying to add more into the schedule. That would be fantastic as a service to our local communities coming into the autumn time soon. So we would love to get lots of people in for that. So stick around, we're going to talk about arthritis and training. So first of all, what is arthritis? Now, I didn't actually know this until I started doing a bit more digging, but apparently there are over 100 different types of arthritis, which is kind of crazy, right? 100. Madness. But arthritis is basically the swelling and or tenderness in one or more joints. So some of the symptoms, common ones, are joint pain, stiffness, and as we said, it typically does get worse with age, unfortunately. The most common types are osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis. So osteoarthritis, it causes cartilage, so that's like the hard, slippery tissue that's over the ends of your bones, kind of where they form a joint, where it breaks down. So that cartilage breaks down. Rheumatoid arthritis is a disease in which your immune system attacks the joints, beginning with those linings of the joint, which is not pleasant. There's something called uric acid, and uric acid crystals, they form whenever there's too much uric acid in your blood, which can cause gout. So infections or maybe other diseases such as psoriasis or lupus can cause other types of arthritis. So there are lots of varieties of it. Sometimes we just talk about arthritis as if it's the one thing, but there are different varieties of it. There's different treatments available. It depends on the type of arthritis, and the main goals of those treatments are just to kind of reduce the symptoms and improve quality of life, get you out of the pain cave, as it were. There are no known cures of it. I know everyone's got this, oh, my granny said to do this and this will cure. There's no known cures. I hate to burst the bubble, but hopefully there will be some. There's some treatments have been very, very successful in getting rid of the pain, but hopefully there will be down the road some cures for it to help reverse it. But symptoms of arthritis usually do develop over time, but they can also appear quite suddenly. So if you suddenly have a pain somewhere that came out of nowhere and you don't know what happened to it, that could be arthritis as well. Typical age for developing rheumatoid arthritis is between 30 and 50. So unfortunately that's me. I'm 34, so yeah, something to look forward to, yeah. But it can also actually develop in teens, children, young adults as well. So it's not just older people. Sometimes we associate arthritis with someone who's in their their 70s or 80s, but it can affect younger people as well. So osteoarthritis, it is caused by wear and tear, generally speaking, and it is another one of the main forms of arthritis. So things like an infection, or maybe if you get an old injury, that can exacerbate this natural breakdown of your cartilage tissue. Cartilage, it's like, as I said, it's like a firm, kind of slippery connective tissue in your joints, and protects your joints, absorbs pressure, absorbs shock, whenever you run or you do something impactful. So whenever you reduce the normal amount of this cartilage tissue, it can cause forms of arthritis to develop. So you also are at risk of developing osteoarthritis if you have a bit of a family history of the disease. So if your parents or grandparents have had it, it's a fairly unfortunate sign that you're maybe going to get it as well. Osteoarthritis, it also is more common in people in their 50s and 60s, but there's studies that reveal like radiographic evidence of osteoarthritis occurring in women in their 40s. So it also tends to be a lot more prevalent if you're overweight. So we're banging on about obesity quite a lot in this podcast because it is like the most kind of pressing disease of the modern world. It makes every other disease worse, and this is no different. If you've got arthritis, being overweight makes it worse and can contribute to it as well. Rheumatoid arthritis, as we mentioned already, it's like an autoimmune disorder, and whenever your body's immune system attacks the tissues, this results in inflammation to joints as well as potentially other bodily organs as well. So in the joints, whenever there is this inflammatory response, it affects the synovium. So that's a tissue in your joints that produces a fluid, which is supposed to nourish the cartilage and lubricate the joints. So we always do like warm-ups here, things like in the bike, gentle exercise, gentle movement to get the synovial fluid going in the joints. So that can be an issue if that synovium is damaged, or it's not being produced as much. So whenever you're kind of destroy the bone and the cartilage inside the joint, you can obviously imagine the pain that's potentially going to lead to. Now, the exact cause of what makes your immune system attack itself, essentially attack your own body, it's unknown, but some scientists have thought that genetic markers that can increase your risk of developing rheumatoid arthritis by 5 times. So it's not very pleasant, is it? It's not a nice outlook, but it's important to kind of know what we're talking about, what we're discussing before we go any further, and kind of put some sort of meaning to the phrases and the terms, and just understand what it is we're dealing with today. So tend to be quite familiar with the symptoms of arthritis, but we're going to go in a little bit more detail just to give a really good overview. So things like joint pain, stiffness, swelling, they're the ones that we kind of know of. They're the ones that you'll hear people talking about if they have arthritis. But your symptoms can also feel worse in the morning. So whenever you get out of bed or if you stand up after you have been resting for a while, they can make it worse. So there's some other symptoms, so things like limited range of motion, that maybe goes away after a bit of movement. So I know I've had clients like that in the morning. Took a wee while just to get going. They actually preferred training in the evening because they're a little bit more warmed up and loose then. Maybe clicking or popping if you try and bend. Even muscle weakness around the joint. Bony growths in the fingers. Instability. Buckling of the joint. And then even things like grating or scraping, that sort of feeling in the knees. Doesn't feel good. And then things for rheumatoid arthritis, there's other symptoms like morning stiffness. It can take about 30 minutes or so before you kind of start getting loosened up. More than one joint is affected, so it might not just be one joint. It might be both knees, or it might be both ankles, or both wrists, or whatever. Fatigue as well. Maybe even a little bit of a fever, a little bit of a temperature, inflammation, for your eyes and mouth, which is quite surprising. A lot of people maybe wouldn't realise that, and I certainly wouldn't have realised that until I did a bit more digging. Even inflammation of your heart and your blood vessels, low red blood cell counts. You also don't know that if you wake up in the morning, you're not aware of those sort of things, apart from maybe the eyes and mouth. But sometimes an onset in smaller joints like your feet and your hands. So the ones that you're standing on or you're doing loads of stuff with your hands, those are the ones that can be affected as well. But arthritis can maybe caused by sort of wear and tear of a joint from overuse. So as I said, injuries, obesity, so if you're carrying too much weight, and if you have any other autoimmune disorders, it can also be a trigger. And then genes, family history, and muscle weakness, which brings us to why it's important to do some training if you can and when you can. So yeah, it's all fun stuff, right? Yeah, yeah, really fun. And it's nothing to look forward to, but there are some things you do. Obviously, there's drugs and there's medication, and you can get prescribed those sort of things depending on the type of arthritis that you have, and that's something to chat about with your GP. But aside from that, there's things like hot and cold therapy. So cold water therapy is really popular these days, but hot and cold, even though it's a temporary fix, just applying a bit of heat and then a bit of ice to your joints, your arthritic joints, the ones that are giving you bother, it can sometimes ease the inflammation and the pain, just to get a bit of temporary relief if you're in the pain cave, if you're just hurting all the time. Weight loss as well. It's not, I'm not saying it's a cure, but it's something that can alleviate the symptoms, which is as good as a cure, let's be honest, as we get older. But whenever you're overweight, it's going to add extra stress to your joints, right? Not just, even if your joints are in perfectly good working order, if you're carrying extra weight around all the time and it's not useful tissue, it's not useful weight like muscle, which will help support itself, then it's damaging. It's going to add extra stress to your joints, and it is going to damage them with impact, with anytime you load them, not progressively, basically. So whenever you lose weight, it can help alleviate some of that pressure. And I don't mean muscle. If you're built like an absolute tank and you're really, really strong, I'm not saying you should lose loads of weight and get really thin and, just get stick thin. That's not what I'm saying either. So in many ways, whenever you diet, obviously, whenever you look after your diet and you train, bit of weight loss as well. So those are the things that can be even more effective than just medication or drugs. There's lots of backup behind that as well. If you look it up, if you can obviously do things more naturally rather than taking drugs and medication, even better. It's more of a long-term solution, right? Sometimes we need painkillers, sometimes we need stuff to get the pain down just so we can sleep. And if you're not getting sleep, it's going to lead to other problems, right? But losing weight, we've all put weight on over the last 2 years, right? Ironic that, respiratory illness, which tended to attack those who are overweight more often. It's ironic that we all put on weight, right? But this is another area where losing weight and not carrying extra fat tissue is beneficial. Something else, braces. So if you can give your arthritic joint some support, like a brace or a splint, just to give it a little bit of extra support and stability, so so it can work properly, why not do it? It's not that it should be used all the time. It's not that it should be something that you rely on for the rest of your life, as a cause of habit, but it should be something that maybe you could revert to if you have to, when you have to. Don't see it as like a long-term crutch. Don't pretend like you're in that place all the time. When you need to, when it's necessary, why not? So even just things like going to a physio. Sometimes you need a physio. Sometimes you might need a sports massage. Sometimes you might just need a little bit of soft tissue treatment, which can help alleviate some of the stress around the joint. So, for example, say your back is achy. Say your knee's sore. So if you got a little bit of tissue working your calf, your hamstring, or your quad, or your Achilles, and you get that loosened up, that's going to alleviate a little bit of pressure in and around the knee. So even if there is a bit of inflammation there, you're going to help stay out of pain, which is important. And then, like we said, exercise is obviously an incredibly effective way to manage pain. If you have osteoarthritis, it's safe to exercise with arthritis, and also you can improve your joint health, you can improve your joint function, range of motion, and build muscle, get stronger, which is going to help support your weight. So whether you're light or you're heavy, you're tall or you're small, if you put on a bit of muscle, you're going to be able to support your frame much better. Pack a bit of meat. There's something called TENS, and this is something I had never heard of before until I started looking into more of this, but it's known as transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation. So it's probably something like, when you think about it, yeah, you probably see it or it makes sense, but TENS, as it's known, is a procedure that uses light electrical pulses to change the way pain is felt. So yeah, something else to look into if you are suffering from this in a severe way. And then when or if necessary, surgery. I try never to recommend surgery to anybody. Not my place, not for me. But if you can avoid it, obviously it's better to avoid it. Yeah, I think you'd agree there. But yeah, if your joints kind of aren't, your arthritic joints aren't responding to other forms of treatment, or to any of these other things, then sometimes it might be necessary to have surgery on them, unfortunately. And then there are some more advanced, newer techniques and treatments available, like biologic medications, and they're normally given by injection or infusion. And there's been great advances in rheumatoid arthritis treatment, although not necessarily for osteoarthritis. But there is the first oral biologic drug for rheumatoid arthritis. I'm not going to try and pronounce it, but it's available at the minute. According to one study, this was published in 2014 issue of the New England Journal of Medicine. It was better at slowing joint damage and lessening rheumatoid arthritis symptoms than the current mainstay treatment. So I don't want to give you the names of these things because I don't want to prescribe drugs. This is what this is about. We're not going to prescribe drugs in this channel. But there are things to look into, is what I'm saying. Okay, you can go do your own research and chat to your own doctor, but there's things coming up, there's things that might help you in the future. But I always like to point people to the things that are available to us right now. I mean, we all know exercise benefits, right? We all know that eating well benefits us in a variety of ways, but we don't do it. We're waiting for this new miracle cure, we're waiting for this new miracle drug. And 90% of the things that, the benefits that we're looking for, we can get from the current things that are available to us. Exercise, sleeping well, managing stress, doing all of these things and doing them consistently. But it's like somebody who can't sleep very well, and will stay up until like 2 o'clock in the morning on their phone or watching TV, blue light getting into us, and instead of trying to go to bed earlier, getting outside in the sunlight, getting a melatonin production going, doing all the basics, we'll just want a sleeping pill. We'll want something else, right? We'll want a new bed. We'll spend money on all these things whenever the cures that are currently available to us are free. We just need to invest a little bit of time and a little bit of effort into applying them. So yeah, kind of the same principle here, I guess, is my take on it. I think we're better staying away from medications and drugs as much as possible. I know every now and then it is necessary. I mean, if I'm going to get surgery, I prefer not to be cut open and fully awake. Just my preference. I know everyone's different, but just my preference. So another question you might have is, can we avoid arthritis? Are we all doomed to have arthritis? Um, in some cases, we can do things to help prevent. In other cases, it is very much genetic. So things like family history and your age, and what sex you are as well is going to play a part. You can't always prevent it, unfortunately. There's lots of different varieties of arthritis that are more common in women. So there's things that are out of your control, and that's just life, right? There's lots of stuff out of our control, but there's an awful lot of stuff in our control. There's things that we can do to avoid being in pain. So there's a few healthy habits. I mean, we're always promoting them. Like, there's a lot of crossover here depending on what your ailment is or what your condition is, but there's a lot of things that will cross over and will apply. But you can help reduce the risk of developing the pain that goes with arthritis as you get older. So a lot of these practices like exercise and training, eating well, they help prevent other diseases too, like we're always talking about here. So in general, things like a variety of things, a balanced diet, as they say. So obviously fruit and vegetables, meat, fish, eggs, beans, legumes, milk, dairy products, all that sort of stuff. Rice, potatoes, pasta. So balance really is key. And nutrient dense foods is probably the most vague but specific way I can put it. As we said already, if you're overweight, losing weight will really, 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 really help with coping with arthritis. It'll help alleviate the symptoms and the pain. The pain is the thing, okay? There's lots of other things. I mean, we're all getting a bit stiff as we get older, right? But pain is a different matter. Pain just makes you grumpy. It makes you irritable. It just grinds you down and beats you up. So we don't want to be in pain constantly. So if you get too much, as I said, if you got too much weight, it places extra pressure on your joints, your hips, your knees, your ankles, your feet, your back even as well. So this leads to more pain and then more mobility problems because we stiffen up, we compensate, and there's all sorts of unforeseen knock-on consequences as well. So first of all, omega-3 fatty acids are something you want to look into. So they are a type of polyunsaturated fat. They have lots of benefits. So they can help reduce inflammation in your body. There's actually research that has shown that taking omega-3s will help reduce rheumatoid arthritis activity in the joints, which is obviously something you want to look into if you have rheumatoid arthritis. But things like fish, so fish are quite high in our omega-3, so salmon, trout, mackerel, sardines, kind of oily fish, I guess. Wild fish caught is also preferred over things like farm fish. They tend to probably have better quality omega-3s and more omega-3s. Nuts and seeds, walnuts, flax seeds, chia or chaya, I don't know how to pronounce that, but chia seeds are all good options as well. And then things like eggs are all good as well. There's supplements available as well, but if you can get it straight from the fish or straight from the nut or the seed, even better. And like I said, managing your weight. So if you think about, your knees have to support all of your weight in your body, okay? So knees tend to be the one people complain about having arthritis in. I've got arthritis in my knees, got arthritis in my wrists. There's all sorts of places you get arthritis, but knees are the one. They have to kind of, all your body weight basically goes through your knees, your poor knees, and there's not a lot of muscle around them. Yes, there's your quadriceps, but there's not a lot of muscle in around the joint. So a lot of times the knees start to get sore and achy. It's because you've lost range of motion in your ankles and in your hips. So if that's the case and you're overweight, guess what? The knee is getting an absolute pounding in between. So if you're even just 10 pounds overweight, so what's that? There's 2.2 pounds in a kilo, just for reference. The force that you are putting on your knee with every step, it increases by about 30 to 60 pounds. Is that crazy? So people with a higher body weight, and this is people, not just, I don't mean like people who are huge amounts of muscle mass, it's like slabs of muscle on, they're really strong. People with a higher body weight are up to 4.55 times more likely to develop knee osteoarthritis than people at a moderate weight. So if you're carrying extra weight, most of us carry it around our basically north of our knees, right? We carry it around our waist, carry it around our hips, carry it around our chest, all those places, which is above our knees, which means gravity is putting force down through our knees. We don't tend to carry most of our weight below our knees, right, and our calves and stuff like that, or our ankles or cankles. But obesity is also linked to a higher risk of rheumatoid arthritis. So it's worth trying to drop weight for that reason alone. I would say it's worth trying to get in shape if you just don't want to be in pain anymore. So as we said, diet and exercise are obviously effective for bringing your weight into a healthier range. We say it all the time. I say it's like 80% nutrition and diet. If you're trying to manage your weight, and then training comes into that as well. It helps to manage it long term. It helps to do it, and it kind of amplifies the effects of your good nutrition, of your smart nutritional behavior. Training then. So we're going to get more detail into training, what to do, what not to do. But training, it not only takes the stress of excess weight off your joints, because as you lose weight, as you get slimmer, but it's also going to strengthen the muscles around the joints. So there's all sorts of studies that have found that if you've got rheumatoid arthritis, especially in your knees, you're going to have weak quadriceps. It's just, they go hand in hand. And sometimes they don't know whether one leads to the other. So if you get sore knees, you stop squatting, you stop using the muscle, or it's just the lack of muscle, it causes that compounding of damage in your knee joints. But this stabilizes them. It can help protect from the wear and tear as well. If you get more muscle in the bones, as we said, it's going to work together better. Your body's meant to work that way. It's got connective tissue, it's got muscle, it's got tendons, ligaments, joints. It's got all that stuff to try and help everything work according to plan. So whether you do, I would say strength exercise is a really important one. All you need, if you've got rheumatoid arthritis or osteoarthritis, all you need is like bone density start going down as well, right? And you're going to get all sorts of problems. So endurance or aerobic exercises, so walking, swimming, biking, things it's going to get your heart pumping, it's going to build a bit of endurance. That's fine. Again, you don't need to go over the top with it, but I would encourage people to kind of walk and do something every single day. It's not going to be too stressful, it's not going to be too hard on you. Build it up gradually. But so yeah, training, there's lots of training options. Strength exercise, going to get that a little bit later. And avoiding injuries is another important factor. So over time, our joints do tend to wear out naturally. It's just the age, right? It's just too many times around the sun, as I say. When you injure your joints, for example, say you're playing sports, or say you have a car accident, or say just something innocuous. You were drunk one night and you fell off a pavement. I hear that every Monday. Not every Monday. I'm only joking. Don't want to give you a bad impression of my clientele, but though the amount of people my clients who come to me and they'll say, "Oh, I've got this old injury." I'm like, "What happened?" And I'm like, "I don't actually know. I was out for a night out, and I woke up the next morning and my shoulder was aching, or my knee was sore." The amount of times that happens, it's kind of crazy. But it's just a little aside. But yeah, you can damage that cartilage and cause it to wear out more quickly if you have injuries and accidents and things like that. So about 50% of people, what about this for start? About 50% of people that injure their anterior cruciate ligaments, so their ACLs, it's commonly known, they'll develop X-ray evidence of knee osteoarthritis within 10 to 15 years. Isn't that crazy? So I guess like for sport people like footballers and stuff like that, their career's over anyway, so they don't need to worry from a career point of view and a performance point of view, but they're probably going to experience some pain, so it's even more important for those guys to manage their weight and keep their legs strong. So that risk exists even more for people who have surgery to repair the ACL tear. So if you've got that ACL reattached, you're going to be even at a higher risk. So avoiding injury, just mobilizing joints and things like that, which brings us to mobility, trying to restore joint function in your ankles, your knees, your hips, your back, your shoulders, your elbows, your wrists, your neck. Everywhere there's a joint, basically, you want to mobilize it every single day. You want to restore function, and it will be harder in the mornings, as we said, but you want to make sure you're doing that regularly. And then protecting your joints. So whenever you load up, whenever you're lifting something heavy or squatting down or climbing stairs, it could lead to problems on down the road. There's actually some crazy stats here. Some studies have shown that workers who regularly have to lift heavy objects, or squat or kneel or climb stairs, are more than five times more likely to develop knee osteoarthritis than workers that don't lift heavy things. So standing and being exposed to vibrations, there are other things that are going to affect osteoarthritis and are going to cause the risk to go up. So sometimes we look at desk workers and office workers, and like, you know, they talk about sittings and you smoking, and it's really bad for your health and takes so many years off your life. But there are consequences if you don't look after your weight, if you don't look after your nutrition, if you don't train and you haven't got enough muscle. That osteoarthritis is going to be a consequence of that. I guarantee you these studies are on workers. They haven't assessed their body mass, they haven't assessed their muscle percentage, their body fat percentage. I guarantee you most of them will not have enough muscle to support their frame. They'll have too much fat for their joints to cope with. So things like builders, cleaners, farmers, metal workers, floor, like tilers and floor layers and people like that, joiners, etc. But if you use the right techniques, obviously if you know how to squat properly, if you know how to deadlift properly, if you can use those skills, you can use those strengths to apply to your job as well. Now, repetitiveness is obviously going to be you're going to be fighting against that, but if you have a bit more muscle, if you're a bit stronger, you're going to be in a better situation to be able to carry out those things. It's a general adaptation whenever you build strength, so it applies across to lots of different activities and makes you better at them, makes you more equipped to deal with them. So always want to just carrying the weight close to your body, so you're not putting too much stress on your wrists as well. Don't let your wrist be pulled back. Don't overextend your knee, keeping your heel down as well whenever you're doing things like climbing stairs or stepping down from things, and trying to mobilize your hips and keep them working well. One of the last ones we're going to talk about is smoking. So don't smoke, basically. It kind of sums it up. It's not a good idea, is it? I mean, it's really hard to stop it, I know that, but if you're listening and you're thinking of starting, if you're young, there's no young people listening to this one, I think everyone's like over 30, but if you're young and you're listening to this and you're thinking of starting to smoke or starting to vape or do something that you think's cool, you're not being cool. Ask anybody who smokes, right, like when they're kind of 30s, 40s, 50s, they all regret it. They all regret because they can't walk up a hill without being out of breath. That's not even getting into the higher risk of lung cancer and heart disease. It's just, you know, they're stinking all the time. They've got smelly teeth. They've got smelly breath. They've got smelly fingers. There's there's yellow stuff everywhere from the cigarette. Basically, don't smoke. Have I done my bit to put you off smoking? Smoke if you want to, but I just think it's a stupid idea. I think it's a really, really silly idea. I would love you to convince me otherwise, but imagine that we used to think that was a good idea. Imagine we used to think that, yeah, it's healthy. Like, inhaling smoke is healthy. It kills people in house fires, but it's healthy when we do it just a little bit. That's a crazy thought, right? How could we ever thought it was good for us? Anyway, so in 2009, the first review of studies was published on smoking and the risk of rheumatoid arthritis, and the researchers, they found that male smokers were about twice as likely to develop rheumatoid arthritis as female smokers, believe it or not. Sorry, let me check that out. Yeah, female smokers were about 1.3 times as likely to develop rheumatoid arthritis as female smokers. So that's crazy, isn't it? I'm going with that again because I think I misread that. The researchers found that male smokers were about twice as likely to develop rheumatoid arthritis as male non-smokers. So non-smokers and smokers, that's the difference. So they're twice as likely. Female smokers were 1.3 times as likely to develop rheumatoid arthritis as female non-smokers. Sorry, I mucked that up. But that's crazy. That's a lot. That is a lot. So for every one person that developed, for two people who were developing arthritis, for every one person, if you're male, if you smoked. So researchers believe that the increased risk may be because rheumatoid arthritis affects the way the immune system works. Rheumatoid arthritis is an inflammatory disease, and smoking promotes inflammation throughout the body. No kidding. Smoking can also affect your treatment outcome. People who smoke don't respond as well to arthritis medications. In particular, studies show that smoking may prevent the tumour necrosis factor inhibitors that treat rheumatoid arthritis from working properly. So this is from Healthline, I believe. I got this information. You can look it up. Something else to think about is getting more ergonomic. So trying to set up your desk at work, your desk at home, your kitchen table, your car seat setup, making sure everything is in the right position, because you're going to get sore joints. Even if you don't have arthritis, you're going to get achy joints, your posture's going to change, you're going to be in bad shape, and that is going to have, it's going to just make you go further down the pain cave, really, and it's going to make, if you have arthritis, it's going to make it worse. And then also, just keep an eye on your blood sugar levels. So this is a really interesting study. The ratio between arthritis and diabetes goes two ways. The CDC they say 47% of US adults with diabetes have arthritis. 47% of US adults with diabetes also have arthritis. People with arthritis face a 61% higher risk of developing diabetes. So pretty significant stats. Arthritis and diabetes also share common risk factors like obesity, lack of exercise, and age. Sometimes age is a funny one. You know, people say like, you know, this disease is worse for older people, or this disease, you know, affects you worse as you're older. I'm wondering though, is it because we've had more of an opportunity, we've had longer time spent self-sabotaging, like messing ourselves up. Like, if you're a 20-year-old smoker and a 60-year-old smoker and you've been smoking for 40 years and the 20-year-old smoker's just started, whose lungs are going to be in the worst condition, the 60-year-old or the 20-year-old? It's not just because the 20-year-old's younger, it's because he hasn't smoked for as long, right? He hasn't had 40 years of poisoning himself. So yeah, something to bear in mind whenever you hear age being listed as a risk factor in anything really. So yeah, blood sugar levels, keep an eye on that. So one reason that high blood sugar may lead to constant state of low-grade inflammation in the body is arthritis. So there's a 2019 study, review of studies found that people with type 2 diabetes are more likely to develop osteoarthritis even if they're not overweight. So that's one reason that high blood sugar may lead to constant state of low level inflammation in the body. So inflammation can be good, and we're going to discuss that when it comes to training, but when it comes to arthritis, it's not good, and especially too much of it and too often of it, it's not a good thing. So getting regular blood sugar checks, getting diabetes treated is really, really important. Just so you can avoid complications like nerve and eye damage, stuff like that. That's nasty. So the next question you might have is, can you train with arthritis? We already said you can, so that's kind of that question answered, right? So we'll move on. Just kidding. So there is a study here on ncbi.nlm.nih.gov. So it's a academic website basically, and there's a quote here and it's saying that intensive strength training can change thigh composition in older adults and has shown promise in treating the underlying biomechanical, so that's knee joint loading and inflammatory disease pathways. Studies in healthy older adults associate intensive strength training with an increased fat-free thigh mass and quadriceps cross-sectional area and decreased percent body fat and thigh subcutaneous fat with minimal alteration in total body weight. So that's saying, in short, that if you've got arthritis in your knees, basically you can still keep training, and I would agree, you can train. Now, there are different severities of arthritis. There are different ways to train as well. But if you've got arthritis in your fingers and your hands, you know, you might have other joints affected as well, but it doesn't mean that you should not train. It doesn't mean that you should just go, oh, it's sore. So we know what the pain is, right? So, as we said, there's lots of studies showing that strengthening your muscles will support your joints, improve your function, reduce stiffness, improve mobility, and can actually reduce pain as well. So whenever you focus on the form, you focus on the full range of motion, whatever that means for you, rather than trying to do loads and loads of reps or something. You're gonna try and manage the pain, okay? So it's gonna be working a little bit differently to someone who doesn't have these issues, okay? So if an exercise doesn't feel comfortable, don't do it. Simple as that. If it feels really, really painful, how much can you tolerate? I'm not telling you to just go and hurt yourself here for fun, but you know, what are you gonna do? What's the alternative? Do you avoid training altogether? Do you just, you know, stick on Netflix and lie up on the couch? Do you just do walking or swimming instead? Those things are probably going to get sore to some extent if you don't train. And as we said already, if you avoid training, if you just say, strength training is not for me, is osteoporosis for you? I don't mean that sound like a threat, but realistically, there's a very high chance that you're going to develop osteoporosis if you don't strength train. To some extent, your bone mineral density is going to go down. It's going to become more brittle, and it's going to become more breakable. So if you couple trying to manage arthritis, which is a relatively minor, now it's easier for me to say, I'm not in pain, I'm not the one in pain talking like this, but it's relatively minor compared to osteoporosis. If you have a bone fracture, an osteoporosis related bone fracture, how are you going to manage that with your arthritis? How are the two of them going to feel together? Which is going to feel worse? Not as a competition, but do you get what I'm saying? Is your alternative just not to train? I don't know, maybe it is, but only you can answer that. So, in short, yes, you can train with arthritis, and we're going to discuss how you can do that and the best way to do that, and some worse ways to do that that are not advisable. So, does training make arthritis worse? It could do. It depends on a variety of factors. I guess it's a bit like asking, is holding your breath bad for you? Well, yes, if you hold it so long that you pass out or die, I would say that's bad. I would say it's a bad result. However, if you practice building up progressively, small, maybe start with 10 seconds and 15, build it up to a minute, it might actually help you get better at swimming and managing your breathing, managing stress, all that stuff. Or it's a bit like asking, is jumping into cold water in your shorts bad for you? Well, it is if you stay in so long that you're not used to it and you develop hypothermia. You have to go to hospital. Again, potential of a fatality. I would say that again, that is bad for you. But lots of people are jumping into cold water these days, right? You see people swimming in the sea. It's not warm. You see people jumping into ice baths, all this sort of stuff on social media. They've built up a tolerance for it. They get acclimatized to it. They get adjusted. They create an adaptation, and they progress that adaptation. I don't mean to be sarcastic when I ask those rhetorical questions back to you and then answer them, but the same kind of nuance has to be applied whenever someone asks a question. It depends. It depends is almost always the answer to any fitness or nutrition related question, because there's so many variables, there's so many things that can determine whether it's the right or wrong thing, or whether it's a yes or no. So yes, if you train the wrong way, then yes, it is going to make things worse. It's going to make your arthritis more painful. It's going to cause too much inflammation. That's going to hurt. But if you train correctly, if you get to know what suits you, what works, what doesn't, if you build things up gradually, progressive overload, and that might mean something a little bit different for you if you have arthritis than the rest of us. But yes, if you train correctly, build strength, build more muscle mass, this will alleviate pressure in your joints, you'll be able to support yourself, you're freeing better. Wherever you have arthritis, whatever joints or wherever arthritis could develop. So yes, it could make it worse, but it could also make things much better if you do it correctly. So it depends on where you have arthritis, how severe it is, your training history, your background, your perception of pain, stuff like that as well. So how would I advise that you train if you have arthritis? First of all, it depends where you have it, but generally speaking, I have quite a lot of experience, as I said, at the start of training older clients, of people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and even beyond that, and many of whom have arthritis to different extents and different types of arthritis, and going by their feedback, working with them and how we manage things, there's a few things that I've learnt, and one of them is it goes against conventional wisdom. So if you look it up online, you look up even some of the arthritic websites regarding weight training, they'll all say, and almost every website will say this, is don't lift heavy weight, but do lots and lots of reps, do loads of reps. I would say this is a problem, and this is the wrong approach for a few reasons. One of them is the stress. So if you're applying stress to yourself by lifting weights, it's kind of the point, right, of lifting weights, is to accumulate stress on the muscle, force it to adapt. Now, if you've got arthritis, I'm going to advise you to still lift some weight, but start lighter than you maybe. I might start training you with lighter weight than I would someone else, and then I will take smaller jumps than I would with someone else. But I'm going to keep the reps 5 or below. I'm probably going to start with doing 5s, and I'm going to bring it down as you progress. But 5s certainly for men, and then eventually for women, for older people, down to 3s. So you're gonna want to lift a heavy load and for fewer reps, because you don't want to overstress yourself. Overstress is the enemy. It's gonna create inflammation, as we said, and it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt more. So every time you do a rep, there is an eccentric contraction. Okay, you're gonna test your muscles. You're gonna stress your muscles eccentrically. So the lowering of the weight. So there's a famous study done. 2 different groups. One group was they climbed up to the top of a mountain. The other group, they got a cable car up to the top of the mountain, and they let the group that went up to the top on the cable car, they let them walk back down. The group that climbed up, they let them come back down the cable car. Now, who do you think was the more sore? Who do you think hurt the most? Who accumulated the most stress in their muscles? It was actually the group that got the cable car up and walked down. So that eccentric, that lowering phase, that going down, that was what did the damage. That's what hurt them. It's not bad. It's just microscopic tears in the muscles, but there's a stress that comes with that. So if you try to do lots and lots of reps with very low weight, that is going to hurt more. That's going to hurt your arthritis. I would suggest more than lifting heavier weights, but with fewer reps. Does that make sense? It should make sense. The other side of it is if you're lifting with very little weight, light weight, you're not going to get stronger. You might increase muscle endurance, you might increase stamina, but you're not going to get stronger. Stronger means more weight, whether it's pressed or pulled or loaded in general. You add more weight every time you do it. If it's lightweight and you're able to do it for lots and lots of reps, you're not training strength. You're not training the strength of your muscle. You're training its endurance capacity, and you're training it's your cardiovascular system as well, essentially. So it's something else to be aware of. So training you might get a bit of a flare from training. You want to try and keep those minimal. You want to keep them small. Sometimes you might have to just take a step back and maybe not do as many sessions per week. Maybe you need a little bit longer to recover. But it's if you're detrained, higher reps are going to be even worse than the low reps, because of that accumulation of stress. So yeah, I would suggest doing the opposite. Now, there are all sorts of other things you can do, like mobility exercises for your joints to keep them mobile, to keep them feeling good. Remember, every joint has a knock-on effect for other joints. So if an ankle or a knee goes wonky, suddenly the hip is going to maybe start feeling a bit funky. If your back starts to get a bit tight, it might be the fault of somewhere else. So other things to be aware of. I would suggest not training as often as maybe someone else who doesn't have arthritis. So if you're thinking you're wanting to train 3 times a week doing weights, I would suggest twice a week. Give yourself a couple of days recovery in between. Avoid overdoing things. Avoid overstressing the muscles. The biggest way, as I said, is overdoing how many sets and reps you're doing. Keep them to a minimum. But the goal is to try and get stronger, right? The goal is to try and increase the strength of your muscle, increase muscle mass potentially as well. But yeah, schedule exercise for times of day that you're least likely to suffer from pain and inflammation. So like we said, in the morning time you might be stiffest and sorest. Evening time might be a better time to do the training then. So a lot of it's common sense, right? If you have rheumatoid arthritis, balancing your rest and your exercise is really, really important. It's important not to get overstressed in general, not just a weight training stress, but overstressed in general. So whether it's your job or whether it's your family or whatever, try and manage your stress as best as possible, because there can be repercussions from that. But yeah, in general, mobility, strength, all those things are going to help. Doing lots and lots of reps at low weight, as I said, is not the way to go. For those reasons, you can do some cardio. I would suggest maybe walking. Start off, see how that goes. Don't overdo it. Start light, start low, build it up gradually. The goal is progressive overload. So that's the principle of gradually adding a little bit more stress every time you do it. So that could be in a variety of ways. It could be Maybe you go a little bit longer walking, maybe you go add in a few hills, whatever it is, whatever progress looks like to you, you can adjust that to suit you. But certainly for the vast majority of people who have arthritis, unless you have a really, really severe, what's the word, bout, if you have a really severe bout of arthritis, most people are going to find more benefits from strength training than drawbacks. But it's just a matter of adapting it to you. One thing not to do is, like, if you've got arthritis in your wrists and your knuckles and your hands, is not to do things like boxing. Okay, probably not do things like push-ups either, because it's gonna maybe overstress the joint. But you might be able to get to do those things at some stage. Maybe do push-ups like with dumbbells, hold on to dumbbells. Maybe grip instead. If your wrist's particularly sore, maybe grip so your wrists are straight. That's the other thing you can do. You can do the correct exercises but do them wrong. So you maybe do bench press, but if your wrists are all bent back, it's gonna be sore. If you do squats wrong, it's gonna hurt. That's the same for anybody, whether they've got arthritis, you don't have arthritis. There's always right ways and wrong ways to do exercises, and it's even more important that you get that correct when it comes to training with arthritis. So, going to round up on this week's news, and the first story we've got is from futurity.org, and it's actually from the 21st of July, so a little bit late, but it's more or less than the last week. So the title of it is Low Muscle Mass Linked to Cognitive Decline. This is by Fabian Laundry McGill. A new study finds an association between low muscle mass and cognitive decline in older adults. Increasingly prevalent worldwide dementia negatively affects the lives of millions of people and their families. By the time of diagnosis, the process appears to be irreversible. The new research in JAMA Network Open, however, identifies muscle mass as a more modifiable factor that could potentially be used to decrease the risk of developing the condition before it's too late. The work highlights the importance of muscle mass as an independent factor linked with rapid cognitive decline. Low muscle strength has been recently associated with the greater risk of dementia, but little is known about a possible link between muscle mass and cognition, said lead author Stephanie Chevalier. Apologies, Stephanie. A scientist in the Metabolic Disorders and Complications Program at the Research Institute of the McGill University Health Centre. With this study, we show for the first time that the presence of low muscle mass is significantly associated with the faster cognitive decline, and that this association is independent of muscle strength and physical activity level, among other factors. These findings are important because muscle mass is a modifiable factor, meaning that we can do something about it. Exercise, particularly resistance exercise and good nutrition with sufficient protein, can help maintain muscle mass over the years, adds Chevalier, who is also an associate professor at the School of Human Nutrition at McGill University. Researchers conducted the study using data from the ongoing Canadian longitudinal study on aging, which has a rich dataset on body composition and several cognitive tests conducted in person over 3-year intervals in a cohort of 30,000 people. So it's a pretty substantial study. The research team asked the question whether having low muscle predicts subsequent cognitive decline in 3 domains: memory, executive function, and psychomotor speed in adults aged 65 years and older. We found that having low muscle mass was associated with greater decline in executive cognitive functions over 3 years compared to having normal muscle mass, but not with memory nor psychomotor function loss, says first author Anne Julie Tessier, a doctoral student with Stephanie Chevalier at the time of the study, who's now a postdoctoral fellow at Harvard University. Executive functions are important in our day-to-day activities and behaviours as they help us sustain attention, organise thoughts and make decisions. Beyond their role in strength and physical functioning, muscles are the reservoir of proteins that serve several important bodily processes. Muscles also secrete molecules that can talk to the brain. It is also known that exercising and building muscle mass by bringing more blood flow to the brain can favour executive functioning. Our results show that measuring low muscle mass may help identify people who are at greater risk of cognitive decline. We should measure muscle more widely in clinics, not only in research studies, says Chevalier. Further work should determine if maintaining or gaining muscle attenuates the cognitive decline with age, and if there's a causal link, what the mechanisms are. So pretty interesting stuff. So if you're a man, if you're a woman, if you're older, if you're younger, it's probably a good idea to start building muscle mass, right? And I don't mean, as I always say, you don't have to be Arnie Schwarzenegger. You just have to try and put on a bit more muscle than you currently have, because we're gonna atrophy naturally. Okay, so as we get older, our hormones change, and we start to lose muscle mass, we start losing muscle strength, and there's all sorts of implications from that, both physically and clearly from this also mentally as well. So, love to hear your thoughts on that one, if you have any. Our next News of the Week story is from NBC News, and the title of it is Vitamin D Supplements Don't Prevent Bone Fractures in Healthy Adults. Study finds a new clinical trial calls into question whether a vitamin D supplement is necessary for bone health. And this is by Caitlin Sullivan. This was on the 27th of July 2022, if you want to look it up. Vitamin D supplements are widely recommended to prevent bone fractures in older adults, but a clinical trial published Wednesday in the New England Journal of Medicine found that they may not do much after all. In 2011, the National Academy of Medicine, then called Institute of Medicine, recommended the general public get between 600 and 800 international units of vitamin D daily. That recommendation was based on past research showing that the vitamin may support bone health by aiding in calcium absorption and decreasing bone turnover, which causes bone deterioration. Subsequent studies have yielded contradicting results. While some concluded supplementing with vitamin D was beneficial, while one even found that high vitamin D levels caused by taking supplements could be harmful and cause more falls. That's interesting, isn't it? Not sure how taking a vitamin D supplement could cause more falls, but that's another one for another day. Other trials have looked at both calcium and vitamin D together, making it difficult to analyse the vitamin's effects on its own. That was the goal of the new randomised clinical trial, to determine whether adding vitamin D alone would preventively improve bone health in men ages 50 and up and women ages 55 and up. The results for people who are healthy, more is not better, said lead study author Dr. Merrill S. Leboff, director of the Skeletal Health and Osteoporosis Center in Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. The clinical trial included almost 26,000 adults who were followed for 5 years. Women, that's a pretty big pool of participants too. Women made up half of the number of participants. Black people comprised 20%, and the median age was about 67 years. I'm pretty sure that sentence is both racist and ageist. I don't think you're allowed to identify things like that these days, are you? The vast majority had healthy vitamin D levels. Just 2.4% had levels both 12 nanograms per milliliter, which is considered a severe deficiency. The normal range for vitamin D is between 20 and 50 nanograms per milliliter, though Leboff notes that these cut-offs are arbitrary and each individual is different. Good point. To test if supplemental vitamin D would lower fracture risk, an important measure of bone health, the researchers compared the number of fractures that occurred over the 5-year study period in people who took 2,000 international units of supplemental vitamin D3 to the number of fractures in people who did not take the supplement. Vitamin D3 is a form of the vitamin that's easier for your body to use. It's produced naturally from sunlight or can come from animal sources. Another form of the vitamin D2 is less easy for the body to absorb. Even though the study didn't look at the combined effects of vitamin D and calcium, the participants in the supplement group were allowed to take 1,200 milligrams of calcium per day, which is about the recommended daily amount. This would allow them to get a healthy amount of the mineral, but avoid taking so much that it would have an effect on the results. A key role vitamin D plays in the body is facilitating calcium absorption. In healthy people who were not severely deficient, supplementing with vitamin D did not seem to make any difference in protecting against fractures. The takeaway that is that in general, people shouldn't be popping vitamins left and right if you're trying to prevent fractures. Vitamin D alone is not enough, said Dr. Ethel Siras, an endocrinologist who works with osteoporosis patients in Columbia University Medical Center, New York. She was not involved with the trial. According to Connie Weaver, a distinguished research professor of nutrition science in San Diego State University, most people get enough vitamin D from the sun and their diet. From the sun? In Ireland? Are you kidding me? You're in San Diego, well for you. we're in the North Pole here. We'll be in the North Pole pretty soon. Most people get enough vitamin D from the sun from their diet. Fortified milk and juice are common sources of dietary vitamin D in the US, and oily fish such as salmon and trout are naturally good sources of the vitamin. Supplements aren't necessary for most people and don't appear to provide additional bone benefits. Come over to Ireland and see how much vitamin D production you get from the sun. Oh, Americans, eh? No offense if you are American, listen to this. In the context of reducing fracture, supplements won't do much for most For most people, Weaver, who was not involved in new research, said, the above noted the findings do not apply to people who have severe vitamin D deficiency. Low bone mass or osteoporosis supplements do make a difference in these cases, but even then they don't act alone. According to Sarah's, people who are at high risk for fractures or are deficient do need extra doses of both vitamin D and calcium. People who have osteoporosis or low bone density may also need medications. In addition, exercise to strengthen bones is an important piece in preventing falls. Simply giving people vitamin D doesn't prevent fractures, she said, but adequacy of calcium and vitamin D intake, in my opinion, remains a necessary part of the management of people with osteoporosis. There's anecdotal evidence, actually. I heard this recently. Whenever people do adopt strength training, we all know it's good for bones, good for bone density, it's good for bone mineral quality. But whenever you start doing strength training, there's been some anecdotal evidence where, especially females, that they can actually improve and even improve the density of their bones, but also reverse osteoporosis, which there's no kind of double-blind studies on this yet, but you can't discount anecdotal evidence either. I mean, if a doctor gets 1,000 patients experiencing similar things in similar ways regarding an issue, then you can't say, oh, that's completely valueless data, that's valueless evidence. It's all evidence, and it's interesting. I would love to see more of this stuff compiled, because I strongly would suspect that whenever you lift heavy things, progressively build it up, I wouldn't be entirely shocked if osteoporosis can be reversed for a lot of people. So while vitamin D they're kind of writing it off and saying it's not a magic potion. We'll see. I think it says at the start there's conflicting evidence, but they said in addition, exercise to strengthen bones is an important piece in preventing falls. I don't think people realize the difference between lifting something for 20, 30, 40 reps in a set, how different the stress and the stimulus is compared to lifting something heavy for 3 or 5 reps, heavy enough that you can't do 6 or 7 reps. It's a major difference, and it's a major impact on your bones in a very different way. But yeah, another interesting story, interesting study. If you have any thoughts on it, I'd love to hear them. Are you ready for this week's joke of the week? I'm going to guess you're probably not ready for it, but here we go. What would you get if a dinosaur kicked you in the backside? A megasaurus. A megasaurus. So that is about all for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. If you would like to get in contact, if you have any thoughts, any feedback, any complaints, any better jokes for me, any news stories, if you want to inquire about training with us, get in contact. Our email address info@crossfunctionalfitness.co.uk, or through social media, through Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, website, any of those things, and we would love to chat to you. So have a great weekend. Enjoy the sun, if there is any, where you are. Get that vitamin D, do your weights. Don't forget to train today so you'll be stronger tomorrow, and I will hopefully catch you next week.